one of the videos that came out in which we have Elon Carr, the CEO of Israeli American Council, talking about how they can use, what's going on in Israel. They can somehow learn from what's going on in Israel to somehow use that sort of strategy in the United States to convince the people in the United States, or maybe fighting people in the United States. Here is what he said. I want to know, what is your take and what is your understanding of these sort of arguments in the United States?
We are living in a time of miracles and unprecedented opportunities. And the challenge for us here, and with this I'll end because this is key. The challenge for us here is to leverage Israel's successes into our successes and our victories here, because we are one people. Israel's weakness is ours and Israel's strength is ours. And now that Israel has turned the entire geopolitical situation on its head, our job in the diaspora is to leverage those wins and win here. Do to our enemies here what Israel did to its enemies there, and on that, the IAC is focused.
That's a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow.
What is that, Matt?
Wow. That's, what that is, you can explain it away in terms of that's a segment of the ruling class trying to maintain their status quo, right? And understanding challenges to their authority and their power, challenging to their control of the narrative. You could explain it that way. Or you could also look at it in a sense of these are people who really do believe themselves to be God's chosen people, and that they have a right and a duty to kill those. There's no other way to do it, to kill those to maintain their position. And it's not even about being usurped. It's more about almost like an aspect of mowing the grass, that we have these weeds around us and we have a duty or requirement we need to eradicate them. I mean, that is essentially, I think, what you're dealing with here with in that type of conversation, where I'm not even sure how insecure they actually are, as much as it's just that they're challenged by the affront of being challenged, right? That the temerity, the insolence offered to them has to be responded to. And as well, then this aspect of, we've got to cut the grass. So it's really remarkable what he says in an open forum like that, and how the response from the attendees, of course, were approving. The moderator didn't drop his microphone or say, whoa, 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 hang on, what are you saying here? Because it's clear what he's talking about. I mean, like anyone, I'm sure they'll try and gaslight that away, or explain it away, or make pretend that we're all idiots. What's the expression? Piss on our legs and tell us it's raining. I'm sure they'll try and do that. He didn't mean, but there's no other way to understand it.
Matt, we had Benjamin Netanyahu asking the president of Israel to pardon him. And the response from the president and maybe the oppositions in Israel was that he has to retire from politics. One of the conditions they put out. The second was the investigation of October the 7th. How do you see the whole situation? On the other hand, we had hundreds of retired police officers in Israel asking the president of Israel to reject Netanyahu's pardon request. What is your understanding of what's going on with Netanyahu in Israel? And is this guy capable of being retired from his position, or he's going to continue until the end? I don't know what that would mean, the end, but how do you see this?
Again, I think you could look at this in a general context and understand Israel to be a mirror of the United States in terms of its corruption, in the terms of its entitlement of its ruling class. Certainly, we can understand the fractures and friction and division in Israeli politics, division that's long been there, but seems to have been exasperated and polarized by the excesses of Israel's policies, particularly when it comes to the colonization of the West Bank, the apartheid against the Palestinians, its desire to pursue dominance through the region by just bombing their neighbors and assassinating the neighboring countries' leadership. And that type of excess is going to come back home, right? The chickens are going to come home to roost. And you could say that the same thing about the United States. A guy like Spencer Ackerman has written a great book, explaining how we get Donald Trump because of the global war on terror. You can explain how the excesses here, how the decisions made by both Democratic and Republican administrations leads to a reality, a zeitgeist, a culture in the United States in which someone like Donald Trump rises to the top. When you abandon all pretense about the rule of law, if you abandon, whether it's internationally or nationally, someone like Donald Trump is going to rise to the top. And in Benjamin Netanyahu's case, he's not new like Donald Trump is. Not that Trump is new, but I think people understand what Netanyahu's relationship to power in Israel goes back decades politically. Uh, so I mean, yeah, looking at this in the sense of the division that's in Israel, I can't, imagine how this doesn't become the biggest issue in Israel going forward as they head to elections next year. When I was there a year ago, the biggest issue was Netanyahu's corruption. It wasn't the genocide in Gaza. It wasn't the continual annexation or the encroaching annexation of the West Bank. It wasn't even the hostages that were in Gaza. It was Netanyahu's corruption. And so, we could see that how this can continue to inflame things in Israel politically within its society, because there are clear dividing lines here. For the Palestinians, it doesn't matter. Those lines are all on the side that wants to see ethnic cleansing, continuation of genocide, and annexation. But to the response to Netanyahu's pardon request, I can't imagine Netanyahu would accept those terms. I mean, that seems anathema to who he is and why he's trying to get a pardon. So it's set up this showdown essentially, where you're going to have very much again like the United States, where we're anticipating these showdowns between, say, the Supreme Court and Donald Trump, whether or not Trump has bought off, or whether or not the Republicans on the Supreme Court are going to prove loyal to Trump. I think most of us think they will, but it's still an open question. And I think you have the same dynamics or spectacles soon to come in Israel.
I cannot imagine Israel without Netanyahu, because Netanyahu is becoming the identity of Israel. I don't know how is that possible, but he has been prime minister of Israel for such a long time.
Right.
And you have to talk with just Carl Wilkerson to remember Sharon,
I know, right?
Sharon is that far.
Right. I mean, I am old enough to remember when when the Labor Party was a thing in Israel, but so like those names still ring a bell to me. But the reality is too, I'm also old enough to have known Netanyahu pretty much my entire adult life. Right. I mean, he was important in the early 90s. I mean, so this is a man whose role in Israel has been consequential for 3.5 decades, even longer. I mean, so yeah, the idea of Netanyahu leaving under such a mechanism as you basically have to ban. We'll give you a pardon, but you have to go into exile. That's against everything who that person is. I mean, like, it's just, unless he thinks he's Napoleon and he's going to come back from that exile, but that's not that's farcical or whatnot. But, the idea of civil war in Israel is really not that far-fetched. It's really not something that we could say, oh, that will never happen. I mean, certainly the indicators are there, the concerns are there. About a year ago, the head of the Shin Bet, which is Israel's equivalent roughly of the FBI or MI5, he said his primary concern, his biggest fear, was Jewish terrorism. right? Was this and then you look at the conduct of the Jewish settlers, just listening today to Democracy Now, they had a woman on talking about the conduct of Israeli settlers towards Israeli Jewish citizens, and how that, where there once was somewhat of a line that separated how the Israeli settlers treated Palestinians from how they treated Israeli Jews. Now that line is more or less gone. It's still more dangerous, as she said, to be a Palestinian, of course, but the idea that somehow Israeli settlers won't attack Israeli Jews that's gone. Israeli settlers have attacked Israeli soldiers. So for however many will get back out on the streets to protest Netanyahu, and remember, before October 7th, they have about 1 million people in the streets at times protesting Netanyahu, and a population of 8 million, 9 million. That's amazing. It's massive. We have to remember, though, that there's an equivalent number of armed settlers who view those people who are on the streets protesting Netanyahu as traitors. And so the very real danger of some type of intrastate violence, whether you call it a civil war or not, in Israel, particularly with all the stresses of the last couple of years, the economic stress, plus, as we were saying earlier, the excesses that come from its colonization, the excesses that come from its attempts to dominate the region, from its apartheid and subjugation and genocide of the Palestinian people. Those all filter into society. And then those, of course, take root, and they blossom their own creations as well. Just again, this kind of, referencing, if you don't have a Donald Trump without some type of thing like a GWAT or a Patriot Act, and, bailing out the banks and all these other things. So, what's to come? I don't think there's speculation that we can say is too far fetched.
Yeah. Matt, you mentioned the case of annexation. We know that the Trump administration said that annexation of the West Bank is impossible. He's not going to let that happen. But as we talk, we know that Israel is building barriers, walls to separate settlers from Palestinians in the West Bank. Somehow they're annexing the West Bank without officially being annexed. What is that? What should be a reaction? How do you consider a reaction from the United States to that? Because when you make a wall, when you separate, it means that you want to capture it. I
Right.
don't see any other outcome.
Right. I think the Trump administration, like all preceding American administrations, will hide behind semantics. And so even though it's the occupied Palestinian territories, the Bush administration, the Obama administration, the Biden administration, the Clinton administration, et cetera, will dance around that word. They'll find other words to use. They will say things like, "We don't agree with that assessment," and we've seen them do that continuously. I mean, look at all the reports, all the assessments, the number of organizations and states that were saying Israel is conducting a genocide, and the White House and State Department just saying, we don't agree with that. Even when they have their own people saying a genocide's being occurred, Israel's committing war crimes, Israel's deliberately starving the Palestinian people, all assessments that were provided to the White House or to Tony Blinken at the State Department, Jake Sullivan, and that security advisor, they just simply said, we don't agree with that assessment, even when it came from their own people. So for the Trump administration to say we're not going to support annexation and just call annexation a different word, why wouldn't we think that would happen? And then for whoever follows the Trump administration, whether it's a Vance administration or a Rubio administration, or whoever on the Republican side, or if it's a Democrat administration, it's acceptance. So just as you had administrations for decades saying we will not support Israel's move of their we will not move our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Trump did it, and then what did the Biden administration do? They just accepted it. So those types of things, you can see how it's just, they'll just do as they did before. And you could also see, Nima, the willingness of the Trump administration to use wording and phrasing, or to acknowledge things clearly, that they are not de jure but de facto. And with the recent iterations of the peace plans that we've seen with regards to Ukraine and Russia, you see that with the Americans saying, we're okay, de facto acknowledgement of Crimea, de facto acknowledgement of the Donbass, right? De facto acknowledgement of Zaporizhia and Kherson east of the river. You know, I mean, like this willingness to, what does legality matter to us? What do borders matter? What do conventions and statutes and agreements and laws matter to us? And again, so you see that reflection of in foreign policy, that of domestic policy as well. I mean, this is the administration, Nima, that is saying it's going to go to war in Venezuela through all its actions. And then because of narco terrorism, because Maduro is sitting at the top of a drug network that's killing tens of thousands of Americans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No evidence to support any of it, but they're saying it. And then what do they actually do? He pardons the guy who was running a drug network, you know, convicted in a court in New York City, you know. So they don't care about the reality. They just care that their people who need to hear such reasoning, such narrative, such excuses have it to work with, right? And they don't care what the rest of the world thinks. And they have a slim or a small care or concern for what the American people think. But primarily their messaging is going to be towards those who need some type of plausible deniability as to why they didn't have to think critically about the actions they were taking part in.